Have you ever been outside and tried to get that smooth, silky, cinematic B-roll, but you just can't get a shallow depth of field? You have to shoot it up to f/16 in order to get the shot? I'll tell you why. You ain't got an ND filter. In this video, I talk about what is an ND filter, how to use it, and what are your options in buying an ND filter. Let's get into it. So first, what is an ND filter? ND stands for neutral density. It reduces the intensity across all wavelengths of light equally from entering the camera. It does that without altering the color of the light, which is why it has the term neutral in it. Basically, an ND filter is something you put on before or after the lens in order to cut the intensity of the light before it hits your camera sensor. The way everybody says it and thinks about it is, it's basically sunglasses for your camera. It cuts the intensity of the light so that it doesn't hit your sensor. Now that we know what an ND filter technically is, let's talk about when to use it. Have you ever been outside, it's middle of the day, sun is out, you have your camera at f2.8 because you want that shallow depth of field, and you're at your native ISO, maybe it's 400, or you just all the way down at 100 ISO. Have you ever noticed that everything is overexposed, everything is white, the sky is white, your subject is white? This is when you put an ND filter on and you can get the image that you want. An ND filter allows you to get whatever is in your mind. Because usually if you didn't have an ND filter, you would have to kick up your f-stop to like f22 or f11 or something just to get the image. And most of the time as creatives, you know the vision that you want, and most likely, depending on what it is, it's not at f16 or f22. So in order to get this shot, middle of the day, it's 2 o'clock, sun is out, well, out. I have to be at f16, but let's say this isn't what I wanted. Let's say I wanted a shallow depth of field. I want it to be at f2.8 or something like that. But this is what I want. We use the ND filter. So let's go see what an ND filter does. So this is f2.8. I put that ND filter, I'm able to cut the light. I'm able to stop all the way down like I want and get the actual image I want instead of everything in the background being in focus. I got that shallow depth of field, I'm at f2.8. You see how the difference is? I'm at ISO 200, f2.8, and at 50th of a second. So now you can see the applicable reasons of why to get an ND filter, especially for video. This is the image I want, so I get this image. I put the ND filter on so I can cut that light and get what I want. So for video, when you're outside, you kind of have limits to what you're doing. Let's say that you want to shoot at 24 frames per second. That means your shutter speed has to be at 50th of a second or 180 degrees. Sometimes it's so bright and you have your ISO at 100. Like what are you supposed to do? You don't want to do f22, you don't want f16 because you want a certain look. You're trying to achieve a certain look. You keep the f-stop at f2.8, f3.2, whatever you want it to be, and then you put on an ND filter, and then you can get that shot that you want. That's what an ND filter helps you do. It helps you cut the light so that you can adjust your camera the way that you want it. This is a mistake that a lot of people picking up a camera for the first time do. They allow their surroundings to tell them how to use the camera and tell them how their image should look like. So in this case, to get that vision, you would have to put an ND filter on. So how do you use an ND filter? It depends on which one you have, but it's really simple. So this one, it's simple. You just screw it on the lens. It's 82mm thread, and you can buy them in whatever your camera is. But my biggest lens is 82, so I got an 82. And then I buy step down and step up rings so that I can step down to the smaller lenses, the ones that have 72 and a 77 diameter. There's also ND filters you put in a matte box. Those come in they come in a whole bunch of shapes and sizes, but there's ones you put in their matte box or you buy an attachment for the front of your camera to slide in. Those are usually just pure glass. It's not a thread or nothing. You just slot them in. And those are usually more high quality than the ones like I just showed you. A lot of the times, cheaper ND filters are made out of plastic, and usually, can't speak for you, you've paid $2,000 for a good quality lens with good quality glass. You don't want to put cheap plastic in front of those lenses. You don't want to put cheap plastic in front of glass. That's why you kind of spend the money to get an ND filter, because usually you cheapen up your look, you cheapen up the quality of your final image. There's also ND mount filters. So you have your camera, then you put a mount in between the lens and the camera, and then that's where the ND is. I have one for my cinema camera. I love it. I don't have to carry around a whole bunch of different ND filters. I don't have to switch it every time I switch lenses, which is a big plus for me. But for me and this camera, this does just fine. It's not the best quality. It's also not the worst quality. I literally only use this for content creation type things, and so far it has done the job pretty well. It does have a slight color shift, but it really doesn't bother me because I always color my images. But yeah, this is a for me camera. For my professional camera, it would 100% be a deal, and I would have to, you know, pay the $400, $300 for the Polar Pro one. But the one I have on my cinema camera is quality, and there's no color shift, no vignetting, no nothing. So I won't go in depth about it, but NDs are created in stops. So 1 stop, 2 stop, 7 stops, 10 stops. So 1 stop ND filter will reduce the light by 50% or by half. With that point being made that 1 stop of ND would half your light hitting your sensor, there are different types of NDs. So let's talk about what type of NDs you can buy. So first, the thread-on type. The thread-on type has a couple different ways that you can buy them. So one, you can have each stop as a different ND. So there's a 1 stop, 4 stop, 6 stop, 10 stop, whatever it is, you have those stops. The downside of having 1 stop each ND, if you're running gunning, you have to keep on taking off your ND, then putting another one in if you're not too sure which one to use. You know, it's not that big of a deal, but that is probably the biggest downside. The other one is called a variable ND. Variable ND has like ND2 to ND6 or ND2 to ND10, which is like 2 stops to 10 stops. So you're literally able to turn the front glass and it will add or take away ND. Or it allows more light in, or it cuts more light. The problem with variable NDs is if you get a cheap one, of course, it's gonna have a little bit of setbacks. One, sometimes they color shift. 2, sometimes they are made out of cheap plastic. 3, sometimes they vignette. There's a lot of things that can happen with these cheaper NDs. Then you have ND mounts, which I'm a big fan of. I don't have one for this camera, but I have it for my other. Literally, the ND is in the mount, so you don't have to really take it in or out. Some video cameras also have internal ND, so the ND is built into the body of the camera. The C70 has that. The Ursulina Blackmagic has internal NDs. A lot of cameras are starting to come out with this, and I think that is the most clutch for video for filmmakers. There's slot-in NDs where, of course, they're just the glass and you slot it in the matte box or slot it in whatever device you have. Again, those are probably the highest quality you can get. That's the highest quality of glass because it's literal glass. It's not plastic. It's not cheap. They're like $400, $500. So I can't recommend like a specific brand or whatever. It's really up to you which one to buy. Do your own research. But I personally prefer variable NDs over having each ND as a separate filter, just because I do a lot of run and gun with this camera. So having a variable ND is just much clutcher than having to change out the filter every time because the sun's moving, the clouds are getting in the way. Maybe we're going over here next to a tree and then the next second we're out in broad daylight. So yeah, variable ND works for me because that's part of my process, especially for this camera. I would say for you, just make sure that you look at your options, look at reviews of each brand, see what type of work you do, and then pick the filter that works the best for you and your process and your pockets. If you're a real stickler about like quality and precision, go with the glass one. Go with the ones that like the Moment Pro that's like 2 ND. Get a 4 ND, get a 6 ND. I would go with those over than anything because those are probably the most precise, the most cleanest ones. And if you want even more quality and make sure that you're getting quality glass in front of it, go ahead and get the drop-in filters. Again, 2 ND, 4 ND. Just think about what you do, what you shoot, do your research, and make an educated purchase. You can always return on Amazon. So bottom line, if you're a beginner videographer, photographer, filmmaker, whatever, go ahead and get you an ND filter. Get the shot that you want when you're outside in the daylight. Figure out how to use it to your advantage. Just get one. That's it. Just get one. If you like this video, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.